Some paths lead to destinations. It was unexpected. One decision can have far-reaching consequences. Additionally, the feeling of being on the wrong road isn't often apparent until after you've started down it. For a long time, I pondered over which decisions would be best. Anderson was my spouse when I was 38 years old. Having a family and providing a warm environment for a future kid had been my lifelong goal up until that point. However, Anderson, he and I had different aspirations. First, he did what any good husband would do. He made promises. He promised that we would create a life together. However, as time went on, I came to understand that I was merely a speck in his universe. Anderson showed little interest in me or the potential family we might have had. Things that were crucial to him were his work, his timetable, and his strict methods. I deceived myself at first. I wonder if he would mature. I wish he could see the void that is developing inside of me. But no, there was no change in Anderson. No changes were made to him at all. I felt more and more isolated as the years went by. Is Drake the exception? Drake stood out. The offspring of Anderson's first marriage. He was 19 years old when we crossed paths. Enthusiastic, goal-oriented, and brimming with potential. Just started college. For some reason, Anderson believed that being a parent just entailed providing financial support, therefore he avoided him at all costs. Is Drake the exception? That wasn't enough for Drake. A sense of wanting to forge his own path drove him to prove himself. He exemplified all that Anderson lacked. I began to observe him before I even knew it. A life-altering decision was taken by Drake as he neared graduation. He was expected to accept a well-paying position in engineering by everyone. However, he stated his desire to become a mechanic instead. Upon learning this, Anderson went completely bonkers, making threats to cut him off financially while yelling and ranting. The reverberations of the quarrel reverberated through our home to this day. Drake departed thereafter. Leaving silently the night after graduating, he gathered all of his belongings and left. I was unable to bid farewell. I failed to inquire as to his destination. I couldn't even begin to explain how much it ached to see him go because then I'd have to confess something else. Something I was unprepared to deal with. 2 years have passed. There have been very few occasions since he left when I've seen him. Which connection did we share? By then it had vanished. No one anticipated it happening. Plus, I came to the realization that I couldn't contact anybody else tonight, while sitting in my broken-down vehicle on a dark, rainy road. I had no idea at the time. Still, a sea change was on the horizon. I had no idea it would reach such a high level. Furthermore, it would take place automatically. My fingertips lingered over Anderson's number as I instantly grabbed my phone. I paused for a few seconds, though. It was bound to be a given whatever he said, even if he did respond. Cameron, please summon a tow vehicle. Far away I am. Without saying a word, he would end the call. Sucking hard, I choked. I froze for a little moment, staring at the screen. After that, I decided to end the conversation and go on to another name. My name is Drake. I felt a peculiar unease rising within me. I kept my finger poised over his touch. Can I give him a call? Was this only an appeal for assistance? Or was it another thing entirely? What about the unsaid, unidentified object? Utilizing this rationale, a gentle patter of rain fell on the windows. In the light of my headlights, I caught sight of a towering, powerful figure moving towards me in the darkness. Upon seeing it, an odd feeling of comfort washed over me. By the time Drake got to the vehicle, he had pounded on the window. His calm, familiar voice came through as I rolled it down a little. Will you be my Cameron? Are you all right? He was the object of my fixation. The rain had left his face somewhat moist, and his features were more defined than I had recalled. His posture relaxed yet commanding. No longer was he a boy. This man was real. Not only had the time and space separated us changed, but so had everything else. He had transformed. The vehicle came to a sudden halt, and I was at a loss for what to do, I confessed. I paid a visit to my mom. Plus, it occurred throughout the return journey. Anderson is once again absent from town. The reason I didn't call him is since I'm already familiar with his response. Cameron, please summon a tow vehicle. He can even become irritated with me because of it. If you're new to hearing confessions like these, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications. You might wish this narrative would go on forever before you go on. Drake slightly cocked his head, the look of comprehension on his face. You should have called him, but you didn't. Hush, he whispered. Rest assured. Here I am. Pulling the hood open, he shone his flashlight over the engine as he leaned forward. His muscles flexed with every controlled motion as I observed his deft hand movements. He was more than simply a college student now. Every step he took exuded self-assurance, and his handling of situations was seasoned. By the time he finally sealed the hood, it was obvious that this was not going to be fixed. It's going to the garage, unfortunately. The steering might be stiff, so I'll have to drive it while you sit in the passenger seat. I'll return for my truck later. For now, I'll just leave it here. I paid it no mind. No need for me to. I had faith that things would work out in the end because Drake was here. The car was muggy, but the quiet didn't bother either of us. Without either of us noticing, it seemed to be drawing us closer. As he continued to tell me things and keep the conversation going, Drake would occasionally look over at me. His voice was steady and he filled the space between us with the same effortless ease he always had. I paid attention. Observing him was my job. All of it. His voice, the way his hands moved the wheel, and his physical presence beside me. I failed to recognize the depth of the hole he created in my life when he departed 2 years ago. Even though Anderson had always kept his distance, being in Drake's company was a whole new ballgame. Everything about him, presence, tone of speech, gaze, was electrifying. Some part of me had been beginning to awaken even before that. Until now, I simply hadn't been prepared to see it. That night lingered in my mind. The evening prior to his departure. Our relationship had always been on the borderline, but there was something between us that could have escalated. It was a possibility that had always existed. Drake had returned, this time with more experience, maturity, and magnetic charm. I felt a subtle discomfort rising within me. It was taboo to feel this way. Its placement was accidental. It was though. Every breath I took while he was around brought it, no matter how much I attempted to bury it. I opened the car door after taking a long breath, attempting to restore control. As we pulled up to the garage, "Your voices are different tonight, and you both are aware of it," a voice whispered to me from within. The garage was filled with the odor of metal and engine oil, and the rain pattered rhythmically against the roof. After removing his head from beneath the hood, Drake turned to face me after dabbing a small amount of perspiration from his forehead. His expression seemed contemplative, rather than exhausted. His voice was calm and deep as he announced that it was becoming late. "This car needs immediate attention. Otherwise, we would remain here till dawn. Taking care of it first thing tomorrow is the better option." Nodding, I gave the signal. There was no issue. However, it was obvious from the way Drake stood. That night was everything from typical. He further mentioned that the rain is becoming very intense. "Remain in this location. Before I return to take you home, I'll go get my truck with a friend. You shouldn't have to weather this storm on your own." The subdued authority of someone who noticed the finer points was palpable in his voice. Not at all Anderson. He would not have been concerned in this case. He probably thought I could figure it out. However, Drake was unique. I was overcome by the hush that descended upon the garage as he emerged. I folded my hands in my lap and sat down while rain beat on the roof. It seems to reason that I ought to have been irritated or anxious. It was my automobile that had quit. My arrival home was delayed. The plans I had made had crumbled. However, the peculiar aspect was that I was unconcerned. I felt calm if nothing else. That is not all. It was a good feeling. Why? Automobile breakdown was all that happened. Everything was normal. Everything about it felt out of the ordinary tonight. Everything about Drake, his eyes, his voice, and the air he filled with his presence was comforting. I felt a change happening within me. It was on my mind while I waited. Drake had matured into a man throughout that time. Independent, powerful. When he was there, though, it went beyond that. I was not lonely. Whatever it was, I could feel it sinking into my bones. The outside rumble of an engine interrupted my train of thought. Despite the downpour, Drake stepped inside the garage as he pulled up, showing no signs of fear. "Are you prepared?" He looked directly into my eyes as he asked. I got to my feet, cinched my jacket closer and nodded. We entered the vehicle side by side after strolling outdoors. I felt the sensation intensify as we drove. Looking up at him, I struggled to put into words how I was feeling. As I spoke, a small smile spread across my face. Most people experience some combination of frustration, worry, and a sense of bad luck if something similar occurs. That is not how I feel, though. Actually, I'm feeling a pleasant emotion. While maintaining his focus on the road, Drake grinned faintly. I get it, he remarked. Even when things aren't right, there are moments when they just feel right. Although his voice was gentle, it betrayed a depth of emotion. The barriers I had constructed to encase my feelings of isolation seemed to be eroding. Even though Anderson was physically there, I felt completely alone at that moment. I was even more surprised to learn that Drake had noticed it. It was now obvious that there was tension between us. A subtle but constant nudge was tugging at my heart. This evening dragged on too long. As we neared my house, I gathered my strength and took a deep breath. This has been bothering you for hours, Drake. You must be starving, I whispered, my gaze fixed on you. Step inside and I'll fix you supper just like the good old days. Drake remained silent as he glanced at me briefly. After a moment of hesitancy, the comforting grin reappears. According to him, I couldn't possibly refuse that. And I felt like my entire being was on fire. All the tension I should have felt from the previous night just faded away as soon as we entered the house and I began to cook supper. We acted as if nothing had changed as we laughed and reminisced about the past. However, factors had shifted. We were both aware of it every time our gazes touched. After that, there was no turning back. Over the table, candlelight swirled in a gentle flicker. Like old times, we had been chatting for some time, exchanging anecdotes and laughing. It was easy like old hat. However, the atmosphere between us, it was different. Drake crossed his arms over his chest and sat back in his chair, staring intently at me. Warmth and something else were both reflected in his eyes. Some lightheartedness. The ability to know. I must confess, he whispered with a hint of a smile, you are as stunning as ever today. You seem even younger now than you were 2 years ago, which is kind of incredible. I would be attempting to woo this woman right now if I didn't know you. After all, she's only about 30 years old and I'm 26. The effortlessness with which he had stated it made me giggle. Even though the unexpected praise surprised me, I couldn't help but appreciate it. Well, Drake, I thanked you, but I'm 45 years old, I mentioned with a smile. We've been apart for almost 20 years. With a softer voice, he told Cameron that age is nothing more than a number. Yeah, we're both aware of that. I felt a surge of fire from his words. The room grew quiet, yet it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt thick and weighty, like if something was about to burst. With a little inclination of his head, Drake looked at me as if he could see through to something more profound. Something that we could no longer turn a blind eye to. You've changed too, I replied at last, hoping to alter the subject slightly. Your maturation was evident even before you departed. But you're an adult now. Over time, Drake's grin subsided and a more serious expression took its place. With a brief moment of hesitation, he set his palm on the table and ran his fingers lightly over its surface. After that, he talked while staring directly into my eyes. My heart belonged to you, Cameron. My stomach knotted up in an instant. My name is Drake. I know, he went on to say. Those were the wrong words for me to use. Still, I'd rather not keep it hidden any longer. I left that house thinking that maybe I would forget if I was respectful and didn't bother you. To myself, it seemed like it would be short-lived and go away on its own. It was unsuccessful, though. As his intense stare ensnared me, he inhaled deeply. Something else entirely has changed for me when I gaze at you in this way. Witnessing you such a state of solitude. It breaks my heart, I swear. It felt like the universe had crumbled apart as my heart raced with an overwhelming intensity. While a part of me that I hardly knew begged me to stay and absorb his every word, another half begged me to flee. Drake, I was unable to complete my statement. I felt as if I could not breathe because his gaze was fixed on mine with such intensity. I reached across the table and grabbed for his hand instinctively. My hand was taken by Drake. His body was hot, strong. At that same second, there was complete stillness. We were both movers. Leaning in closer, we exchanged a final glance before drifting off to sleep. So we kissed. It moved at a snail's pace at first. But in an instant, All the pent-up emotions and pent-up stress that we had repressed for so long were released. With a tender touch, Drake drew me closer, his hands cupping my face. I felt an innate pull toward him. As his warmth enveloped me, I began to sense the reawakening of a long-lost part of myself. I realized there was no going backwards at that very second. Something was stirring inside of me even as Drake's lips stayed on mine. I had kept quiet about it for a long time. While he drew me close, my hands drifted down his shoulders. Firm. Yeah, sure. Not a bit rattled. I approached Drake. Peering into his eyes, I beheld the deliberate movement of his hand. It only heightened my excitement. Something was stirring within me. Quite a large object. In spite of the fact that I was in excruciating agony at that very moment, I paid it no mind. The wheels continued to turn. I kept praising Drake while making raucous noises, as if my enthusiasm level matched his. He was also pleased. The enthusiasm in his eyes was obvious to me. Our paths had crossed. In all respects, we were in perfect harmony. I worried that Drake could feel pain from my nails, so I put my hands on his shoulders. A shiver ran down my spine. I was taken aback by the response. Drake seemed to really enjoy it. In an effort to get him to release his grip, I began pleading with him. His voice progressively faded as he finally released himself as he spoke my name, Cameron. I had an overwhelming sense of comfort. As I lowered myself to lie down next to him, I took a long breath. My heart was still pounding as I lay down beside Drake. Although our breathing was erratic, an incredible calm washed over me. Connecting with him, being in his presence, reassembling it was like finding a long-lost puzzle piece. As we locked gazes, Drake shifted to his side. While he traced my cheek, his hand slipped into my hair. His eyes betrayed an unwavering conviction. With that expression, I knew this was for real. That this wasn't just a temporary escape. Leaving Anderson is necessary, he whispered to Cameron. My stomach knotted up. All this time I was holding my breath. That he should assert it. However, the impact of the words lingered. You should never settle for him. Never did he. He abandoned you for a long time. Disregarded your feelings. Turned your life into a shadow of what it should be. You are not deserving of such a life. I attempted to utter a word. However, he forbade me from doing so. We can begin again in a different location if you do this. In an unfamiliar land where we are completely unknown. Anything else is of little concern to me. Cameron, you are loved by me. Plus, it breaks my heart to watch you in your state of despair and isolation. I looked directly into his eyes. His eyes betrayed a desperate need, and his speech was genuine. I was deeply shaken. A comforting feeling washed over me. It had been years since I'd felt that. With any luck. Was this a way out? Possibly yes. However, it presented a chance as well. The prospect of experiencing joy I had never known before was glaring back at me. A big sigh escaped my lips as I grinned. My name is Drake. I couldn't get the words out of my mouth. Our eyes spoke volumes at that very moment. With our fingers intertwined, our hands discovered one another. The plot was far from done. Beyond that, there was more. And it was progressing at an even faster rate this time. Keep watching to find out what happens next. You must have been deeply moved by this narrative if you have read this far. You will not want to miss a single word of what I have to say. Please consider following this story, enabling notifications, and leaving a comment.